Good evening, everyone. Thanks for coming out tonight. My name is Matt O'Donnell. I'm Associate Editor of Bowdoin Magazine, and I also edit From the Fishouse, an online audio archive of emerging poets, which is very proud to feature tonight's reader, Ross Gay. I'd like to thank Kim Pacelli and Tucker Harrison and Lawson Wilson, the rest of the Bowdoin Res Life staff, for their support of our reading series. And additional support from this series has been provided by the Andrew Mellon Foundation and the Davis Family Foundation. Tonight's reading is extra special in our reading series because it's being webcast live. So I'd like to say hello to those folks who might be tuning in out there through cyberspace. Hopefully Camille, you're out there out in California, and a whole bunch of other, Curtis in Spain. Hopefully that would be really cool. So that's exciting. And I have to thank Donald King and Mark Lehman in Bowdoin's AV and IT departments for making this webcast possible, and DJ back there behind the camera. From the Fishouse is a literary journal and a nonprofit organization dedicated to fostering the art of poetry, in particular the oral tradition of poetry, and to the promotion of emerging poets. And we've defined emerging as poets with fewer than 2 books of poetry. That was a really hard thing to do, by the way, but for the scope of this project, that's what we decided on. And we mail digital recorders to the poets who record themselves reading their poems and self-interviews about the craft of poetry. And we post them on the web where they're available to download for free, as are the webcasts, as are the podcasts of all of our live readings are up on Apple iTunes now. So we're lucky to have a poet here tonight whose work displays a highly crafted relationship between the sound and the sense of the poem on the page and the poem in the air, and really exemplifies the Fishouse mission. Ross Gay is the author of the recently published poetry collection Against which has already sold out of his first printing in just 3 months. And actually, we had to scramble. I had to buy books from Colby from the reading last night just to have a few here. So it's really exciting that this fantastic book is getting so much attention, that people are reading it, and great for poetry too. That a poetry book sold out in 3 months. That's just awesome. Ross was born in Youngstown, Ohio, and grew up outside Philadelphia. He graduated from Lafayette College with a double major in English and art, and was also a standout football player. He's a fellow of Cave Canem, the renowned writers' center that focuses on African-American poets and writers, and he recently completed a PhD in American literature at Temple University. Ross currently teaches poetry at Montclair State University in New Jersey, is a high school basketball coach, and is also a poetry faculty member in the low residency MFA program at New England College. I'm going to quote from Gerald Stern's beautiful introduction to Ross's book. Gay earns whatever resolution he makes by way of an exhausting struggle with words, ideas, and emotions. I see at the center of his work a powerful tension between 2 forces, which I'll call rage and tenderness. And it is these 2 opposing yet complementary forces that create the form, the objective and sustaining mythos for his poetry, which gathers into itself those biographical facts which otherwise might be mere fragments of a life, pieces of an existence. End quote. Ross Gay's writing typifies the importance of poetry in our lives. He's already in this first book, and well into a second from the new poems we've heard, elevated his art to a level of accomplishment that many poets can only hope to aspire. Against which is a collection full of poems that are relevant in our everyday lives as we constantly stumble into the knowledge of ourselves and our surroundings. Please give a warm welcome to Ross Gay.
Thank you, everyone, for coming here instead of there. That's always the best place to be. All right. And hi to Curtis, wherever you are. I want to say a couple things. First, that Matt handily beat my ass at squash today. And I'm sort of competitive, so I'm in a bad mood. That's not true. I am competitive. I'm in a good mood. And second is that If you're not familiar with that website, definitely, check it out. It's beautiful. I teach with it. I get my students to use it, and I go on there and sort of get amazed by the poets regularly. So anyway, it's an amazing job. It's a really good job you're doing, Matt. This is called Bringing the Shovel Down. Because I love you, and beneath the uncountable stars, I have become the delicate piston threading itself through your chest. I want to tell you a story I shouldn't, but will. And in the meantime, neglect, love, the discordant melody spilling from my ears, but attend instead to this tale. For a river burns inside my mouth, and it wants both purgation and to eternally sip your 1,000 drippings. And in the story is a dog, and unnamed it leads to less heartbreak. So name him Max. And in the story are neighborhood kids who spin a yarn about Max like I'm singing to you, except they tell a child, a boy who only moments earlier had been wheedling through sticker bushes to pick juicy rubies, whose chin was, in fact, stained with them. And combining in their story, the big kids make the boy who shall remain unnamed believe Max to be sick and rabid, and say his limp and regular smell of piss are just 2 signs. But the worst of it, they say, is that he'll likely find you in the night. And the big kids do not giggle. And the boy does not giggle, but lets the final berries in his hand drop into the overgrowth at his feet. And if I spoke the dream of the unnamed boy, I fear my tongue would turn an arm of fire, so I won't. But no, inside the boy's head grew a fire beneath the same stars as you and I, love. Your leg between mine, the fine hairs on your upper thigh nearly glistening in the night. And the boy, the night, the incalculable mysteries as he sleeps with a stuffed animal tucked beneath his chin and rolls tight against his brother in their shared bed who rolls away. And you know by now, there is no salve to quell his mind's roaring machinery, and I shouldn't tell you, but I will. The unnamed boy on the 3rd night of the dreams which harden his soft face, puts on pants and a sweatshirt and quietly takes the spade from the den, and more quietly leaves his house where upstairs his father lay dreamless, and his mother bends her body into his. And beneath these same stars, love, which often when I study them seem to recede like so many of the lies of light, the boy walks to the yard where Max lives attached to a steel cable spanning the lawn, and the boy brings hot dogs, which he learned from Tom and Jerry. And nearly urinating in his pants, he tosses them toward the quiet and crippled thing limping across the lawn, the cable whispering above the dew-slick grass, and Max whimpers. And the boy sees a wolf where stands this ratty and sad and groveling dog, and beneath these very stars the boy brings the shovel down, and Max's hind legs stop twitching, and his left ear folds into itself. And the unnamed boy stares at the rabid wolf whose wild eyes loll white in his head, taking slow steps backward through the wet grass, and he feels, for the first time in days, the breath in his lungs, which is cool and a little damp, spilling over his small lips, and he feels again his feet beneath him, and the earth beneath them, and starlings singing the morning in, and the somber movement of beetles chewing the leaves of the white birch, glinting in the dark, and he notices, darling, an upturned nest beneath the tree, and flips it, looking for the blue eggs of robins, but finds none, and placing a rumpled crimson feather in his mouth, slips the spindly thicket into another tree, which he climbs to watch the first hint of light glancing above the fields, and the boy eventually returns to his thorny fruit bush, where an occasional prick leaves on his arm or leg a spot of blood the color of these raspberries, but tasting of salt. And filling his upturned shirt with them, he beams that he could pull from the earth that which might make you smile, love, which you'll find in the fridge, on the bottom shelf, behind the milk, in the bowl you made with your own lovely hands. I sort of prepared this reading. I don't often do that, but I did today. And we're going to see how it goes. This poem is called Beat Him Again. And it's that sort of poem about that kid in your neighborhood who had something that made you, well, you know, you'll hear it. Beat him again. Should I close that? Bless you. Thank you. Beat him again. Ubiquitous pip of spit licked to the twisted lip. This, plus the half-pimp, half-gimp hitch in his stroll, made plain his break and deform. Weakness, the ripe smell of blood. Tourette's was a foreign word to kids whose dad smelled bad after work. Look, his tongue was broke as an incontinent dog. It would slip. To us, that meant beat him. What else? Beat him again. It's a poem called The Bullet. The Bullet and Its Hunger, it's called. And I wrote this poem out of an experience. I was teaching some kids in a section of Philadelphia and Kensington for a couple months. And this one boy was shot in the face. And he came back, he lived, and it was so interesting because he sort of was, like the week before, he and some of his buddies were kind of joking around and talking about how it was something that was going to happen in a year or whatever. And he said, you know, we're not going to be around. What are you talking about? We're not going to be around in a year. Turned out he was around for a year, but he did get shot in the face the next week. And I was just talking to my buddy who still works at that school, and he asked me if I heard about Domingo. And I said no. And he said, well, he was killed. He was shot 5 times in the chest. This is called The Bullet and Its Hunger. The bullet in its hunger craves the womb of the body, the warm from there, begs always release from the chilly, dumb chamber. Look at this one whose glee at escape was outshone only by the heavens above him, the night's even-keeled breath. All things thus far dreams from his cramped bunker, but now the world. Let me be a ravenous diamond in it, he thinks, chewing through the milky jawbone of this handsome 17-year-old. Of course, he would have loved to nestle amidst the brain's scintillant catacombs, which, only for the boy's dumb luck, slipped away. But this will do. The bullet does not, as the boy goes into shock, or as his best friend stutters, palming the fluid wound, want to know the nature of the conflict, nor the sound of the shooter's mother in prayer, nor the shot child's future harmonies. The tracheostomy's muffled wheeze threaded through the pencil's whisper as the boy scrawls, I'm scared. No, the bullet, like you, simply craves the warmth of the body. Like you, only wants to die in someone's arms. I want to read this little poem. It's in my pocket. I just want to hear it out loud again. It's called Dogs, I think. This one's snout in the bones. This one's snout in the bones and his tongue out. This one's howl, the spine of the night. This one's ruddy cock made stiff by the screams. This one wet-faced. This one's face like a boy's. This one shriveled to the size of a rat, its eyes replaced with flies. That one's mother with her teats dried up, snapping at the flies in her little boy's eyes. This one with his snout draws a circle in the dirt around his dead and dying. This one with new flesh still hanging between his teeth pisses in the circle where the dead are lying. This one trots through the fields that are fallow, and this one the fields wide bloom. This one snatches the food from the sick and gives it to the one who waddles when he walks. That fat one lies on his belly like a snake, and shit comes from his mouth when he talks. This poem's called Cousin Drowses on the flight to Kuwait. Does she dream of Saturn, of molars, of the jeweled corridors of palaces? Dream the commander's robes, his crooked smile? Dream sooty bellows of cumulus? Dream dress? Dream a lover's breath? Dream wind over dunes, the voices riding night winds? Dream whispered light of stars? Dream teddy bear? Dream mother, father? Dream baby, sister? Dream mirages? Dream your body riding the air? Dream the body's tenuous earthen cleave? Dream birthmark or crooked toe? Dream every hair on your head? Dream galaxies aswirl at each finger's tip, the trigger's smooth tick? Dream brown faces, your brown face? Dream the commander, cockeyed, the tumble of diamonds stumbling from his toothless mouth, his florid robe flailing above a fat body? Dream the dragon's toothpick, fibula, femur? Dream orchard abloom in bloody soil? Dream the improbability of your legs, ambulatory pleasures, sand, frosty towpath, gravel road? Dream breezes combing clover growth, threading a graveyard's grass? Dream the random calculus of shrapnel, or your skin wrapping the corral of muscle and bone, the galactic swell of blood cells heaving? Breathe, dream, breathe. I was just on a flight to Indiana, and there are all of these guys coming home. They were coming home from various wars, the various wars that we're engaged in. It's not just one, actually. And there was that. This is called Prayer for My Unborn Niece or Nephew. Today, November 28th, 2005, in Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania, I am staring at my hands in the common pose of the hungry and penitent, studying the emptiness therein, where I see my sister-in-law dazed from birthing the small thing which will erase, in some sense, the mystery of my father's departure. Their child will emerge with 10 fingers and toes howling, and his mother will hold his gummy mouth to her breast, and the stars will hang above them, and not one bomb will be heard through that night. And my brother will stir, waking with his wife the first few days, and he will run his long fingers along the soft terrain of his child's skull, and not once will he cover the child's ears or throw the two to the ground and cover them from the blasts. And this child will gaze into a night which is black and quiet. She will pull herself up to her feet, standing like a buoy in wind-grooved waters, falling and rising again, never shaken by an explosion. And her grandmother will watch her stumble through a park or playground, will watch her sail through the air on swings, howling with joy, and never once will she snatch her from the swing and run for shelter because again the bombs are falling. The two will drink cocoa, the beautiful lines in my mother's face growing deeper as she smiles at the beautiful boy flipping the pages of a book with pictures of dinosaurs, and no bomb will blast glass into this child's face, leaving the one eye useless. No bomb will loosen the roof, crushing my mother, while this child, 4, sees plaster and wood and blood where once his Nana sat. This child will not sit with his Nana, killed by a bomb, for hours. I will never drive across 2 states to help my brother bury my mother this way, to pray and weep and beg this child to speak again. She will go to school with other children, and some of them will have more food than others, and some will be the witnesses of great crimes, and some will describe flavors with colors, and some will have seizures, and some will read 2 grade levels ahead, but none of them will tip their desks and shield their faces, nor watch as their teacher falls out of her shoes. This child will bleed and cry and curse his living parents and slam doors and be hurt and hurt again, and she will feel clover on her bare feet, will swim in frigid waters, will climb trees and spy cardinal chicks blind and peeping, and no bomb will kill this child's parents. No bomb will kill this child's grandparents. No bomb will kill this child's uncles. and no bomb will kill this child who will raise to his mouth some small morsel of food of which there is more, while bombs will fall from a sky like dust brushed from the hands of a stupid god, and children whose parents named them will become dust, and their parents will drape themselves in black and dream of the tiny mouths which once reared to suckle or gasp at some bird sailing by, and their tears will make a mud which will heal nothing. And today I will speak no word except the name of that child whose absence makes the hands of her parents shiver, a name which had a meaning, as will yours. Are any of you familiar with the poets Terence Hayes or Kyle Dargan? Yeah, okay. Well, it just so happens that one time I was up at Bread Loaf, and this woman came up to me with Kyle Dargan's book and said, "Hey, could you sign this for me?" Kyle's like that tall and doesn't look anything like me. And then another day, like 2 weeks later, I was at this sort of party thing, and this guy came up to me and he started having a conversation with me, and I think he said, Terrence. And Terrence was in the other room, and he was having a conversation with Terrence a few minutes ago. So this is called, so I wrote a poem about it. What else am I going to do? This is called Within 2 Weeks, the African-American poet Ross Gay is mistaken for both the African-American poet Terence Hayes and the African-American poet Kyle Dargan, none of whom looks anything like the other. If you think you know enough to say this poem is about good hair, I'll correct you and tell you it's about history, which is the blacksmith of your tongue, your eyes. Where you see misunderstanding, I see knuckles and teeth for sale in a storefront in a quiet hamlet in Dixie. I see the waterlogged face of a 14-year-old boy, the bullet's imperceptible sizzle toward an unarmed man. And as you ask me to sign the book that is not mine, your gaze shifting between me and the author's photo, whispering, "But that's not you," I do not feel sorry for you. No, I think only that when a man is a concept, he will tell you about the smell of smoke. He will tell you the distance between heartbreak and rage. This is called Opera Singer, this poem I'm going to read. Opera Singer. Today my heart is so goddamn fat with grief that I've begun hauling it in a wheelbarrow. No, it's an anvil dragging from my neck as I swim through choppy waters, swollen with the putrid corpses of hippos, which means lurking somewhere below is the hungry snout of a croc waiting to spin me into an oblivion worse than this run-on simile, which means only to say, I'm sad. And everyone knows what that means. And in my sadness, I'll walk to a cafe and not see light in the trees nor finger the bills in my pocket as I pass the boarded houses on the block. No, I will be slogging through the obscure country of my sadness in all its monotone flourish. And so imagine my surprise when my self-absorption gets usurped by the sound of opera streaming from an open window, which means only that my budding neurosis has bloomed into delusion, for this is North Philadelphia. But I continue walking, and the sun peeks ever so slightly from behind his shawl, and this operatic singing is getting closer, so that I can hear the delicately rolled R's like a hummingbird fluttering the tongue, which means a language more beautiful than my own. And I don't recognize the song, though I'm jogging toward it now and can hear the woman's breathing through the record's imperfections. And above me, 2 bluebirds dive and dart, and a rogue mulberry branch leaning over an abandoned lot drags itself across my face, staining it purple. And looking now like a mad warrior of glee and relief, I run down the street. And I forgot to mention the 50 or so kids running behind me. Some in diapers, some barefoot, all of them winged and waving their pacifiers and training wheels and nearly trampling me, when in a doorway I see a woman in floral house dress and slippers blowing, and who is maybe 70. She's painting the doorway, and friends, it is not too much to say it was heaven sailing from her mouth, and all the fish in the sea, and giraffe saunter, and sugar in my tea, and the forgotten angles of love, and every name of the unborn and dead from this abuelita only glancing at me before turning back to her earnest work of brushstroke and lullaby. And because we all know the tongue's clumsy thudding makes of miracles anecdotes, let me stop here and tell you I said thank you. How are we doing for time, Matt? Okay. What's that? Always good for time. Make fun of someone. Okay. I'm going to read this poem called Two Bikers Embrace on Broad Street. Maybe, since you're something like me, you too would have nearly driven into oncoming traffic for gawking at the clutch between the two men on Broad Street, in front of the hospital, which would not stop, each man's face so deeply buried in the other's neck. These men not, my guess, to be fucked with. Squeezing through that first porous layer of the body into the heat beneath. Maybe you, too, would have nearly driven over 3 pedestrians as your head swiveled to lock on their lock, their burly fingers squeezing the air from the angels on the backs of their denim jackets, which reminds you the 1,000,001 secrets exchanged in nearly the last class between your father and his brother, during which the hospital's chatter and rattle somehow fell silent in deference to the untranslatable song between them. And just as that clasp endured through what felt like the gradual lengthening of shadows and the emergence of once cocooned things, and continues to this day, so, too, did I float unaware of the 3,000-pound machine in my hands, drifting through a stoplight while I gawked at their ceaseless cleave going deeper and deeper still, until Broad Street from Fairmount to the Parkway reeked of the honey-scented wind pushed from the hummingbirds now hovering above these two men, sweetening somehow the air until nectar, yes, nectar gathered at the corners of my mouth like sun-colored spittle, the steel vehicle now a lost memory, as I joined the fire-breasted birds in listening to air exchanged between these two men, who are themselves listening forever to the muscled contours of the other's neck, all of us still and listening, as if we had nothing to blow up, as if we had nothing to kill. Okay. This, I haven't read this in a while. This is called Outside the Wake of a Friend's Father. And, okay, whatever. Outside the Wake of a Friend's Father. Although I know I should be trying hard to palpate this common sorrow, to unspool sympathy for the bereaved stumbling and sobbing inside those doors, my tongue sits like a stone in my mouth, and the truth's matter is I am, right now, contemplating the mysteries of light on an ankle. That one in particular, which beneath this sun favors the earth's lush shapes from an airplane. And it might be the dogwood abloom like a gaggle of screaming angels makes me dumb, or the wrenched guts sleight of hand, but that ankle has put death to bed and has me dreaming of the lucky saint whose tongue transcribes channeled sapphic fragments throughout the minute ravines there. And I know I should stop. Except I hear my own father's dust at this moment whispering in a breeze, no, no, go on. So let me sing the largest praise upon the subtlest juncture of flesh and bone, bony bud, the pillow upon which scripture was dreamt and writ, mother of the muses and their gowns flowing just above their ankles, and the sun's hot mouth breathing on me in dress pants, afraid to enter the parlor, for my own wound lying in that casket rubs also its lips along that minuscule mountain of motility, crossroads of the foot's Baroque architecture and the girder of the shin, delicate crux calling at once birdsong and the melodious stirrings of worms, ecstatic axis whose dragonfly-like skimming of the New Jersey asphalt parking lot sucks gasps and moans from all of Trinidad's tar pits, ankle, for which I would give my good hand to listen to its trillion vascular secrets, which include heartbreak's 4,268 glistening names: silk, stamen, inseam, moonlight, diamond, father, smoke, mirage, ankle. Don't ask. Just close your eyes, get on your knees, and pray. Okay, I think I'm going to read about 3 more poems. This is a poem called How to Fall in Love with Your Father. I think I'll drink a little bit first. Are you all wearing long johns? No. Well, I mean, it's up to you, but if I lived here, I would be. It's so cold here. How to fall in love with your father. Put your hands beneath his armpits, bend your knees, wait for the clasp of his thinning arms. The best lock, cheek to cheek. Move slow. Do not, right now, recall the shapes he traced yesterday on your back, moments before being wheeled to surgery. Do not pretend the anxious calligraphy of touch was signed beyond some unspeakable animal stammer. Do not go back further into the landscape of silence you both tended with body and breath until it nearly obscured all but the genetic gravity between you. And do not imagine wind now blowing that landscape into a river which spills into a sea, because it doesn't. That's not this love poem. In this love poem, the son trains himself on the task at hand, which is simple, which is, finally, the only task he has ever had, which is lifting the father to his feet. And here's another poem about my old man. Actually, I'm going to read 3 poems about my old man. This is called Patience. You know, this is a true thing. I knew my dad for my whole life, from the day I was born. And he was very much in my life. I was very close to my dad. I love my dad. And I never knew he had freckles. Like very, very, very light freckles. Patience. You wait. You wait until his sweats won't stop, until papery skin just cloaks each clavicle, until the necrotic tumor's sloughing keeps the gut taut with fluid. You wait dry heaves and wet, wait the man's last recede to notice the freckles sprinkled across his nose and cheeks, to put your lips to them, each one. This is called Why Would We Not? And it comes from a conversation from my buddy, Pat Roselle, who's going to be here. He's a poet. He's going to be here soon. And the conversation was basically a friend of his asked him if he talks to his mother who's dead, do you talk to her? And he said no. And she said, why not? Why would we not? Why would we not speak to the dead who have, in their union with the womb of the sea and earth, become the hands caressing the burdened muscles churn? What dumb fist said, and when did it say, do not chew bone silt for the sweet there? which as silky loam becomes pure as the idea of air, said, do not study the precise composition of your hands to speak to your father, said, do not clutch the scent of a food from a galaxy of islands and be reminded your mother's blousy back as she studies oil in a pan, said, do not speak to your dead. In this season, roadside flora wrapped and the river beside me smoothing stones cast in the same breath as the cosmos. Who said this rain to prime the lusty pump of spring? Do not speak to the dead who at long last listened to lament and prayer, at last have become the fullest proportions of light and long for little more than the overt confession, the wounds flooding, the crime for which we are forgiven. Who said, cousin, we ought not speak to our dead who have moved into the threnody of our body's wet machinery? Your mother, my father, kin in the folds of everywhere, which is this deep breath I take now to swear the oncoming salve of light promised me by the earth's temporary flirtation with the sun. To you, Father, I speak and sing and cry and curse and tell you the next gorgeous thing I see, which is now. And I'm going to read one more poem. And it's going to sound a lot like another poem that I read. This is called Bringing the Shovel Down. Because I love you, and beneath the dying stars have become the delicate piston threading itself through your chest, I want to tell you a story I shouldn't but will, and in the meantime neglect, love, the discordant melody spilling from my ears, but attend instead to this tale. For a river burns inside my mouth, and it wants both purgation and to eternally sip your thousand drippings. And in the story is a dog, and unnamed it leads to less heartbreak, so name him Max. And in the story are neighborhood kids who spin a yarn about Max like I'm singing to you, except they tell a child, a boy who only moments earlier had been wheedling through sticker bushes to pick juicy rubies, whose chin was, in fact, stained with them. And combining in their story, the big kids make the boy who shall remain unnamed believe Max to be sick and rabid and say his limp and regular smell of piss are just two signs. But the worst of it, they say, is that he'll likely find you in the night. And the big kids do not giggle, and the boy does not giggle, but lets the final berries in his hand drop into the overgrowth at his feet. And if I spoke the dream of the unnamed boy, I fear my tongue would turn an arm of fire, so I won't. But know inside the boy's head grew a fire beneath the same stars as you and I. Love, your leg between mine, the fine hairs on your upper thigh nearly glistening in the night. And the boy, the night, the incalculable mysteries as he sleeps with a stuffed animal tucked beneath his chin and rolls tight against his brother in their shared bed, who rolls away. And you know by now there is no salve to quell his mind's roaring machinery, and I shouldn't tell you, but I will. The unnamed boy on the third night of the dreams which harden his soft face puts on pants and a sweatshirt and quietly takes the spade from the den and more quietly leaves his house where upstairs his father lay dreamless and his mother bends her body into his. And beneath these same stars, love, which often, when I study them, seem to recede like so many of the lies of light, the boy walks to the yard where Max lives attached to a steel cable spanning the lawn, and the boy brings hot dogs, which he learned from Tom and Jerry. And nearly urinating in his pants, he tosses them toward the quiet and crippled thing limping across the lawn, the cable whispering above the dew-slick grass. And Max whimpers. And the boy sees a wolf where stands this ratty and sad and groveling dog, and beneath these very stars, Max raises his head to look at the unnamed boy. With one glaucous eye nearly glued shut, and the other wet from the cool breeze, and wheezing, Max catches the gaze of the boy who sees, at last, the raw skin on the dog's flanks, the quiver of his spindly legs, Nose to the Franks, the boy watches him struggle to snatch the meat with his gums, and bringing the shovel down, he bends to lift the meat to Max's toothless mouth, and rubs the length of his throat and chin, Max arcing his neck with his eyes closed now, and licking the boy's round face, until the boy stands, taking slow steps backward through the wet grass, and feels, for the first time in days, the breath in his lungs, which is cool and a little damp, spilling over his small lips, and he feels again his feet beneath him and the earth beneath them, and starlings singing the morning in, and the somber movement of beetles chewing the leaves of the white birch glinting in the dark, and he notices, darling, an upturned nest beneath the tree, and flips it, looking for the blue eggs of robins, but finds none. And placing a rumpled crimson feather in his mouth, slips the spindly thicket into another tree, which he climbs to watch the first hint of light glancing above the fields. And the boy eventually returns to his thorny fruit bush, where an occasional prick leaves on his arm or leg a spot of blood, the color of these raspberries and tasting of salt. And filling his upturned shirt with them, he beams that he could pull from the earth that which might make you smile, love, which you'll find in the fridge, on the bottom shelf, behind the milk, in the bowl you made with your own lovely hands. Thank you. Thank you. Do question answer, is that? Yeah? If anyone has questions. No questions?
No, I'd love to hear you read It Starts at Birth.
Yeah, sure. I love that you guys are following in the books. It's so great, because I change words every once in a while, and you probably know it's so funny. It's like, it starts at birth. That's page 7. The newborn railing against the thing behind the sting of air and light, against which too are castles built and moats, against which the futile howl of the body's trillion cells, against which he will bloody her nose often, and she will clasp and kiss the fists, against which the weight of lactating breasts, and the gardener's mud-packed hands and eye lifts, and the collector of the baby teeth of his departed children, against which we put up our hoods and walk backwards as if into an icy wind with the appetite of a river, against which the dazzle of gold-threaded embroidery inside the hangman's mask, the perfume of an ex-lover he sprays beneath the nose-hole, against which the membranes strangling the general's heart, and the blossom of blood staining the ballerina's toe shoes, and the wet eyes of the dog whose lungs are muscled with tumors, against which thousands of languages, each one broken and blessed as the last, against which the coil of lovers blent beneath moonlight, and their sounds wind through the trees, against which the ascent of a crow into the night, a tendril of carrion dangling in the clutched beak, and a moment, a diamond of starlight streaking its black wing, which is what we against it are, impossible, golden, longing, gone. Yeah, you're welcome. Thanks a lot. Appreciate it.
No one has any questions for us? What's this?
You have a question?
Do you write all your poetry in that little tiny book?
Oh, God. That's a great question. No, I don't. No. It's a nice book, though, huh? It says notes on it. No, I don't. But I write a lot of my poems on, like, scraps of paper that are this size. So, yeah. I just hope I don't lose that book, But I will, and who cares? No one will be any worse off for it. Yeah.
Do you do a lot of rewriting?
A lot of drafts and stuff. Yeah, I do. I think I think I probably write. I was trying to think about this more. I think I probably do like 20 to 25 drafts of poems, and I was just realizing that it occurs to me that I will try to start a poem several times, very often. So it'll take me like 5 or 6 or 7 or 10 times to even get it down, like toward a draft, approximately a draft. And all of those feel like they're constituting drafts because I'm sort of restarting it and trying to figure out a way to enter the poem. And then once it's down, and I do a lot of tweaking. I do a lot of tweaking of it.
Do you read after you write them and read?
Read it out loud?
Yeah.
Yeah, every time. Yep. Yeah, all the time. Yeah, because I want to hear, I want to hear it means a lot to me, not just how the poem sort of, what it means, it very much how it sounds in the air, and I was saying, I read it Colby last night, and a similar question came up, and I was saying that I will compose poems somewhat with not only the sound of the poem in mind, but the sound of the audience in my mind, the sound of the audience responding, which is very interesting because this was a sort of quiet audience, and I read also at places where it'll be a very loud audience, sort of a different sort of interactive thing. So these are all things that I'm thinking about with the ear. Yeah. Yes?
Do you ever find that you start writing a poem with a certain intent or an idea, and then when you finish the poem, it's completely changed and has nothing to do with the beginning of the poem?
Yeah, that's to me, that's the sign of a good poem. If I start off a poem going somewhere and it doesn't bend and change directions or doesn't if it doesn't show me something about something I wasn't anticipating learning about, then it's usually a failed poem. I think it's usually a failed poem. And almost always, and this is sort of a cliche, but no surprise for the reader, no surprise for the writer, no surprise for the reader. But that's sort of true for me. If I'm writing a poem and I know it's going to be about the ducks of central Canada, that's not going to be very interesting. But if it's about the ducks of central Canada and all of a sudden it becomes about my mother's limp, that's interesting to me. That's interesting to me. And I guess that's what metaphor is. When you start writing about two things that appear to be very disparate, but somehow they connect, So yeah, do you?
Yeah, that's what I was wondering.
Yeah. Yeah. I think that's a good sign. Yeah. Yeah. Yes, sir.
When did you first start writing poems?
I was about 20 or maybe 19. I was in college, and I was actually like a sort of a disgruntled college student, and I hated the sort of social scene where I was. So I started reading for the first time, which was great, And I didn't read when I was a kid. I read when I was real little. I read comic books, and then I stopped until I was in college, and I started reading, and then I started writing, and yeah, and the poets who were like the most, I started reading like Amiri Baraka. He was like one of the main poets who made me want to start writing, and some of those folks. Yeah. You were going to ask a question.
The pair of poems that you opened and closed with.
Yeah.
Which one of the, second to last one.
Yeah.
Close with Bring the Shovel Down. Which
Yeah.
one came first and how did the second happen?
The one that came first was the one where the dog gets killed. And, actually this came through this sort of like, I felt like there was I wrote that poem and I thought of it as sort of an exploration of a kind of rage and terror and et cetera. And it occurred to me that it was actually a good opportunity to explore how we might encounter rage and terror and et cetera in different way. So what if this boy in the poem, in the story in the poem, sees the dog as a sick dog? So I actually wrote the first poem, and then I thought, well, what if I wrote it differently? And that's how it happened. And that ends up being like, I feel like I had a really major sort of ethical shift in my poems, which is that those two poems points to they sort of exemplify the shift, which is that I don't just want to sort of show the terror. I want to show also the way out of the terror. you know, in my own little imagination, you know, sort of offer resolutions, not only offer the thing, but offer possible resolutions, you know. So yeah, I'm glad you asked that question, because that's sort of like, that's like kind of the biggest question of my poetic life in a way so far. Thanks. Other questions? Thank you. Those were great questions. Thanks.